Right. Welcome everyone, and I hope you had a great week thus far. And hopefully by now you had opportunity to take a look at the course syllabus, get yourself familiar with the course. I will put in weekly lectures for you guys. For this week, we are covering chapter one. The book we are using is Anatomy and Physiology by Marib. You could use six editions, seven, eight, nine, 10, 11, 12. It really doesn't matter. There will not be any homework per se for a particular edition. So basically, you could get a used one. The copy of this book is also available in library. If you like to, you could attend the library MLK and check it out for 1 hour, and then you have to return it. And if there's nobody else waiting, you could recheck it. So I think there's like two or three books available. Same thing goes with the lab, in which I will talk about later in the lab. All right, so the chapter is related to the human body and homeostasis. So let's go ahead and take a look at uh, what are we talking about when we're talking about physiology. Ology is a study. Physio is basically how the organ system function. In anatomy, you learned how the organ system structures, different system. There were a lot of names that you had to memorize. But in this particular course, we are concentrating in what those structure actually, what kind of a job do they perform. So there are different field in physiology, obviously, and you could concentrate in different organ system like physiology of renal system happen to be working with how the kidneys function, for example. Neurophysiology is by itself is a field. We'll touch upon it a little bit later on, but basically how the nervous system is working and operating. Cardiovascular system, again, there are three particular components to the cardiovascular system: the heart, blood, and the system of blood vessels. And again, what is their function? How do we get high blood pressure, low blood pressure? All of those things that has something to do with the function and what they do. Basically, this system operates is what we're going to be looking at. All right, so the focus will be the function of the body, and sometimes uh, due to cellular changes, molecular level changes, structural changes, those function no longer operate. For example, if this is the blood vessels and you have a red blood cells that nice and round, in sickle cell anemia, the red blood cell no longer round and flexible, so they're kind of like sickle shape. Now they could clog up the blood vessels, and as a result of that, the function of the cardiovascular system may not be operating the way it's supposed to. Okay. All right. So moving right along, understanding physiology requires other science as well. So it's not just physiology and biology. There is a lot of rules that might touch upon knowledge of chemistry, knowledge of physics. All right, when we're talking about the gas system, for example, there's a lot of physics involved. When we are looking at calculating different blood pressure, blood counts, etc., there's mathematics involved. Electrical current or chemical reaction in the body, chemistry is involved. So we use a lot of different other sciences as well. Of course, we'll try to make it as simple as possible for now. And then later on, maybe once you develop and retake this course, probably during the allied health program, if you're in it, or maybe when you transfer to a professional school, maybe they will look at it a little bit different depending on which area you are. The concentration might be different. If you are looking at pathophysiology, then the concentration would be diseases, for example. All right. If the concentration is going to be like, rad tech, radio technologies, etc., then like radiologists, the concept would be different. Okay, so the point is that there are different science and concentration might be involved. All right. So one thing that you need to know is what is principle of complementarity. Principle complementarity is basically a structure is always related to the function. All right, or function always reflects the structure. So you're familiar with the structure of many different organ systems, one of which, if you recall, was the small intestine. And the small intestine had this fold known as villi. And then when we looked at each villi, they had microvilli, subfolds basically, and that increases a lot of surface area. Okay, so that is the structure. But what is have anything to do with the function? Well, it has a lot to do with the function because increasing the surface area allow more absorption to take place. And most of the absorption of the food takes place in our small intestine. So again, this is designed in a way that you could absorb a lot of food because there is so much surface areas, right? So again, when you're looking at um, a lot of other system, there are structures, different shapes. You learned a lot of those shapes. They're there for a reason, okay? And so that way, it's related to their function. That's how they are, okay? If the skin cells, for example, there are multiple skin cells on top of one another, and they are flat, and basically they operate as a barrier so microbes doesn't have an easy time to get in. Okay, those layers of cells on top of one another were flat. They were like, um, a squamous epithelium, but they were stratified. Stratified meant like, so many layers. Again, they're there for a reason. Okay, the structure is basically relate to the function. Okay. All right. So when you're looking at the air sacs or alveoli, you see they are really, really thin. They are simple squamous epithelium, meaning they're one single cell at a time. And this is again designed so that substances they can go readily go in or out, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, having it thinner and very thin, flat cells, a squamous epithelium, simple squamous epithelium, allows that to happen. This does not able, you will not be able to exchange gases through your skin, for example. All right. So that doesn't happen because we have, multiple cells stacking on top of one another. Okay. So that was principle of complementarity, structure related to the function. All right, next up, there is a level of structural organization, meaning that there is a unity, there is a organization to the system. It's not just randomly we have different organ system and they're all doing different things. All right, we can start with atoms. Atoms, they can collide with one another to form a molecule. So that is at the chemical level. All right. Molecules can come in together. They're different molecules, obviously. You have molecule of DNA, you have lipid molecules, you have a carbohydrates molecule, you have protein molecule. But anyway, all those molecules can come together and made out of our cells. All right. Okay. Now, some books, they like to, before to get the cell, they like to put in organelles, which is fine too. So you got chemical or atom. From atom, you have molecule. From molecule, you have organelle. Organelle are different department of the cell. They're made out of different molecules as well. Okay. And then different organelle you have making up the cell. Okay. And different cell make up the tissues. All right. And tissues are consist of similar type of cells that are aggregated next to one another and they have similar function. Okay. So the tissues, many tissues can come together and make up an organ system. Like, for example, organ of your stomach or a small intestine, we just mentioned, made out of several different tissues, and you learn that in anatomy. You had like, muscular tissues. You had, the smooth muscle for peristalsis, for example. You had a skeletal, I'm sorry, a smooth muscle for contraction and peristalsis. You had like, some nerve that allows you to know, for example, when to do the absorption, etc. That would be the nervous tissues. You had epithelial tissues, like what's lining the cavities, for example, right? And between them, you have connective tissues. So there are many different tissues making up your organ. The organ can be part of the organ system. So the small intestine is part of the digestive system. The stomach is part of the digestive system. So uh, make sure to go back and review like some of the organs and where they belong to. Like kidneys belong to the urinary system, lungs belong to the respiratory system, etc. Okay, and so all these organ system, they can collectively come together and work as a unit, which will be at the organismal level. So make sure you know the level of the connection and how they are related as well. So here you have atoms making up molecule. Like I said before, you could, before you get to the cell, you could put in organelle, and then organelle making up the cell. In this case, happen to be the muscle cells, and these muscle cells um, at the tissue level. It could be part of the tissue, for example, all right, like in the blood vessels in this case. All right, and the blood vessels is part of the cardiovascular system, so that would be at the organ level. And the organ, I'm sorry, the blood vessels is the organ, and then the organ is part of the organ system. Now is the cardiovascular system, and the organ system is part of the, our body, basically. All right, so is basically it gives you a sense of interconnection between all these components that making up one another. Okay. All right. So reviewing few of the organ system of the body. Some of these organ system we're going to get to a detail. Some of them we won't because maybe we already covered, or you have familiarity with it, or we don't have the time to discuss in details right now. But one of them is integumentary system. This is the forming of the external body, composed of the skin, sweat glands that allow us to, monitor the temperature, oil glands, again, they work together, hairs and nails, etc. Protect deep tissues from injury, entry of microbes, and also they are involved in making synthesizing vitamin D, which is essential for our bone structure. Right? So again, whenever you're reviewing these and you're looking at these organ system or any lecture, you could pause it, you could think it through, and think to think critically. You could also ask yourself, what condition the could it happen that this system is not operating well? All right. So think about those when something goes wrong and these systems are not doing their job that they're supposed to. Okay, you get an open wound, for example, and now you get infection. Now bacteria can go in, so no longer formulating the external body covering anymore. Right, that system is broken now. They can penetrate. Okay, so there is a lot of other things that you could think about. All right. A skeletal system, again, made out of bone, cartilage, and ligament. Ligament is where the bone is attached to the bones. Again, cartilage, it could be like a lot of different type of cartilage you learned in anatomy. And some of the ligaments attaching the muscle to the bone, I'm sorry, as well. And then composed of bones. Majority of the skeletal system is the bones and support the body organs. So when you're looking at your rib cage, it's protecting the lungs and the heart, for example. When you're looking at, your skull is being protecting the brain, for example, etc. So it does a lot of protection. Provides a framework for the muscle. Again, there's site of muscle attachment, muscles attaching to the bone. They're able to pull and work. Site of blood cell formation inside of our bone is actually where you have you know, uh, you have the factory in which you're making a lot of blood. You probably heard about the red bone marrow, for example, within the bone. That's where you're making a lot of, blood cells. The storage of mineral, you probably heard about calcium and phosphate in particular. And if the people, for example, if they have this function is not working properly, storing mineral, they will get like osteoporosis, where bones are really getting thin, they're lacking calcium, etc. Okay, so moving right along. The calcium can does a lot of different things. It could provide the muscle for the contraction purposes. It could, be used in the nervous system for electrical signaling, or it could be deposited in the bone. Now, whenever you have extra calcium in your blood vessels, obviously it can go other places to make things balance. All right. So having a lot of calcium in our body is not a good thing. Having low amount of calcium is not a good thing either. Everything has to be monitored just right. So therefore, this is related to the first topic of the first page, homeostasis. Everything needs to be balanced and monitored. Okay. And too much calcium deposits can clog up the blood vessels, and as a result of that it narrowing the opening in which the blood is passing through, so that creates high blood pressure. So extra calcium, especially when they get deposited in our blood vessels, is not a good news, by the way. So everything should be balanced. Now, how do we make things balance? What if, you have extra calcium, or you want to adjust it, your blood lacking calcium, because all these things require calcium. What if you don't have it? What if you do have it? So that's where physiology comes in. All right. That's to learn the cascades of events that are taking place. It requires a little bit of a studying and understanding, not per se memorizing and like anatomy, trying to memorize something and recall it. All right. This requires a little bit of understanding of the material. All right. All right. Here is showing you a blood vessel with higher amount of calcium. And below that is showing you the blood vessels with low amount of calcium. Um, so basically, generally, in order to achieve homeostasis, a balance, just like anything else, if your blood pressure is high, you need to bring it back down low. If your heart rate is up, then you need to kind of like bring it back down. Automatically, the body is supposed to do that. The same thing with calcium. In this case, the calcium on the first case is that it's high. This could be due to having way too many calcium. You absorb them in your small intestine. From the small intestine, it goes to your bloodstream, and now it's just too much. All right. We need to bring it back down lower. So some of these calcium need to get deposited in the bone. Again, some of them can be utilized in the transmission of the signals in the nervous system, and some of them can be utilized for muscle contraction. But regardless, in here you have calcium, and let's just say that we wanted to deposit it in the bone. So that's where the thyroid gland can produce calcitonin, which is a hormone, and will take this calcium back and deposit it into the bone. Okay, so automatically you're depositing some of the calcium in here, so the calcium is going to be lower amount. It's back to where it's supposed to be, for instance. All right. There's also another next to the thyroid gland, there are parathyroid glands. You could see these dots represent the parathyroid gland. And the parathyroid gland, para means next to, all right, they produce parathyroid hormone. And their job is basically to um, produce parathyroid hormone, or PTH. So this happens whenever the calcium is low in our bloodstream. Remember, or maybe you've been exercising and utilizing a lot of calcium already, and now they're depleted. Maybe there are other reasons why, but anyways, low calcium in your diet, maybe you haven't had any calcium for like, many days, then your low calcium level is going to be lower. So then what happens is the parathyroid gland produces more PTH, and that would activate the osteoclast, which is bone resorption, basically means bone breaking. So this parathyroid hormone activate the osteoclast, which are bone resorption, meaning like now the bone is breaking, and as a result of that, you're releasing the calcium in which you need it. Okay. But the problem of that is that now the bone is paying the price, meaning the bone, instead of being nice and thick, if this continues, is going to get thinner. Okay. So the osteoblast, meaning bone reforming, making bones, osteoclasts are the cells that are involved in bone resorption or breaking. Okay, so again, obviously, if the same trend continues and you keep getting decrease in calcium, maybe from your diet, the bone is paying the price, and that's exactly what happens as we grow older, and many people have, they take calcium pills, for example. Again, consult your doctor, make sure that is what you need to do. Okay, don't prescribe anything for your parents or anything like that. All right, so sometimes the questions I will be asking in the exam or maybe on the assignments will be case studies. In this case, the case study might be, oh, individual has a tumor in a parathyroid gland. So here's a parathyroid gland and producing way too many parathyroid hormone. All right. So now you got to understand this is not normal activity because of the tumor is overactive. They're producing way, way too much parathyroid hormone. In this case, they are activating more and more osteoclasts. And then as a result of that, the bone is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Okay. Uh, because that's what they do. So again, the question would be what happens to the bone? The bone gets thicker, thinner, no change, etc. And then obviously, if you know what is the job of parathyroid hormone, all right, indirectly understanding what's going on with the tumor that is giving you a hint that is increasing parathyroid hormone, automatically you should draw that conclusion. I do not need to talk about every single things that is happening and so on. So you got to use your knowledge and apply. Okay. Okay. So, um, what did we just do was a good example of a negative feedback. In negative feedback, whenever something is up high, we bring it back down low. Or whenever something is low, we bring it back up high. So basically, you're doing the opposite of what's happening. That change that is occurring, whatever that change is, whether from high to low or from low to high, you are countering, you are going opposite, all right, to bring things balance. Okay, so that's a negative feedback system. Another good example of a negative feedback system would be your regulation of your insulin and blood glucose level. Okay, your blood glucose level is supposed to be maintained at certain, we'll talk about this in the lab, but it has to be at certain range. It cannot keep going up, it cannot go and drop. You know that if it drops, you faint, you're not going to be able to do well. If it's too high, that's very dangerous too. You could get a stroke, you could get a heart attack, all that stuff. Okay. But there is something known as a positive feedback. Instead of opposing that change, if it's high, low, if it's low, bring it back up. This positive feedback is basically increase and promoting the change. So if something is high, you're bringing it back even higher. If something is low, you're bringing it even lower. All right. This is called a positive feedback. All right. So a good example of the positive feedback is posterior pituitary produce oxytocin. This is a hormone. All right. And increased level of oxytocin is going to cause the muscular contraction of the uterus during giving birth. This is also known as a hormone of love. So basically, you are contracting and contracting the uterus so the baby able to come out. Now, while individual is doing that, If you apply a negative feedback, then it will be lower. Oxytocin would come lower because it just went up, and now you're lowering it again. If that happens, you're not going to get enough contraction for the baby to come out. All right. So positive feedback happens. In other words, you are getting a little bit of contraction. Now more oxytocin is going to be released. So you're going to get more contraction. And then instead of lowering it, it's going to ramp up the amount. So it's going to get even more oxytocin release and more contraction and more contraction, more contraction until maximum contraction achieve that and to be enough for the baby to come out. Okay. So in this case, you are promoting the change. Okay, you're making it higher in this case, or if it's low, you're bringing it even lower. Okay, and so eventually, obviously, after the baby is delivered and so on, you don't need so much oxytocin increase anymore, and contraction of the uterus it should be stopped. So that's the time that after that it becomes a negative feedback, for example. So that's the idea. All right, we'll go into the muscular system. We'll talk about like a skeletal muscle mostly, but you probably learned the three different type of muscles in the heart, cardiovascular, uh, and the muscles in the smooth muscles and the digestive tract, for example, and the skeletal muscle that we have control over. All right. So again, these are the some of the activities or the jobs that they do, composed of the muscles and the tendons, allows manipulation of the environment, locomotion, facial expression. Anything that moves is probably muscles involved, okay? All right. So your heart moves, there's a muscle in there. Okay. So nervous system. Don't get nervous. This is just another system. Some people, when I talk about nervous system, they get really panicked, right? I'm just kidding. So, composed of the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. There's a lot of nerves, and you learn the names and all that. But basically, there are signals to transmit using the nerves and communicating with other organs of the body, such as muscles and other glands. So again, think about those people that are paralyzed. That connection is not taking place. So they're not communicating with the muscle. That's why they are paralyzed. Okay. All right. So the cardiovascular system, again, I kind of like went over it already. You could think about like, malfunction of it, heart attacks, high blood pressure, clogging of the arteries. There's so many different types, obviously, at the different level. But yeah, comprised of blood vessels, the heart, and obviously the blood itself. Those are the three components. All right, lymphatic system, which composed of the red bone marrow, thymus, the spleen, lymph nodes, lymphatic vessels, some of the fluid that was leaked from the blood vessels. All right, they need to return back into the blood, and that's the primary job of this system. There are also a lot of white blood cell live in these areas, the spleen, thymus, all lymph system, etc. So basically, they are involved in protecting us, immunity. All right. So the respiratory system involves respiration, obviously, breathing, intaking the oxygen and giving off the carbon dioxide. But there are a lot of components. Then again, in the anatomy, you learn about those components, how the air moves throughout these components, etc. All right, but that's the bottom line, basically, exchange of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then you have digestive system. Again, in anatomy, you learned how the process of eating occurs by ingestion and then taking it to different structures, etc. So this is basically it. It basically the function is breaking down the food, getting energy from it, and all undigestible material gets eliminated via the feces or the fecal material. Again, there is a lot of malfunction that can happen. Acid reflux in the stomach, ulcers, colon cancers. There's so many different types of malfunctioning things. Okay. All right. Urinary system, again, your kidneys, urinary bladder, and ureter, and how the system working and operating, basically optimizing the body, getting rid of the waste and optimizing the amount of water, pH, and electrolytes, which refers to the ions. Ions are charged particles. We'll look at chapter 2 later on, like sodium, potassium. We'll call those electrolytes. And the pH balance. So if your blood is acidic, again, it needs to be at the homeostasis level. So you need to get rid of some of those acids in your urine. Okay. And again, a reproductive system. Uh, Different structure that you learned in anatomy. And the main function is production of the sperm for offspring. Obviously, a lot of sex hormones involved, and how this can be maintained. There's a lot of hormones involved. Same thing with the female reproductive system, of his making the eggs and for the offspring. And then again, there's a lot of sex hormones. We will talk about that a little bit later. And again, you can think about all the malfunctions that you can think of: testicular cancer, breast cancer, uterus cancer. There's a lot of cancers, um, you know, cervical cancer, uh, ectopic pregnancies, there's so many things, endometriosis. So you could think about that. But the bottom line is that all these organ systems, there is an interrelationship with one another. Think about the school has a lot of different departments. They might be teaching or concentrating on their own department, but as a school, we're here for the ultimate goal to serve the students, for example, to make them learn, for instance, and we have to go based on certain policies. So there is a lot of interrelationship. It's not just one department doing its own thing. Same thing with our body. There's a lot of system, but they all working together. If you have one system disrupted, it's going to perhaps disrupt the whole system altogether. Take a look at this. All right. There is a lot of wiggly lines. Don't worry too much about it. I just wanted to kind of like bring it up to your attention, like your digestive system absorb the food. That absorbing the food and nutrients, you need another system like cardio to pass all those useful nutrients to the cells, for example. All right. Along the way, there's a lot of waste that we need to get rid of. That's where we use the excretory or urinary system, for example, to get rid of excess water, excess waste, all of that. Undigestible material gets out of the body as well. So the cardiovascular system is important in transporting all those nutrients to everywhere. And respiratory system is important because all the cells require oxygen, whether it's the cells of the digestive system, whether it's a urinary system, whether it's any cells around the our body, all need oxygen. So that's where the gas exchange taking place. And again, in order for the oxygen to be distributed and collect the carbon dioxide, you need the heart again. All right. So again, you could see that in this example, we use like several different systems: digestive, respiratory, circulatory, excretory, integumentary. Everything needs to be protected by the integumentary system. Otherwise, viruses could come in, uh, things can come in, bacteria can come in, and again, they can disrupt our system altogether. So as you can see, it's a beautiful system that they complementing each other and they work, and this is called interrelationship, meaning there is a relationship between them. It's kind of like a good family too. There is a interconnection, interrelationship. Maybe someone in the family member taking care of the kids. Maybe the other ones they're bringing them back from or taking them to school. Whatever the case might be, they're like different task. Hopefully, gets distributed. So, what is necessary for life function? Here are some of the things that are necessary for life function: maintaining boundaries, like having a membrane around the cell. That way you are protecting what's inside as opposed to the outside. At the organismal level, that would be accomplished by the skin and integumentary system. They need movements. Movement of peristalsis to move the foods around, locomotion to do everyday tasks, contractility like your muscles, heart, etc. They're all required. Responsiveness, being able to sense changes in the environment and respond to them. For example, all of a sudden you smell something is burning, you got to respond quick. When you're eating food, maybe the food is bad, doesn't taste right, you got to respond and spit it out, for example. So you're responding to the environment uh, appropriately. Digestion, you have to be able to break things down to utilize the energy for it. Uh, Metabolism. So the metabolism is all the chemical reaction that occurs in the body. All right. There's a lot of chemical reactions in the body. We'll learn some of these. Excretion. Obviously, you got to get rid of the waste. You can't just have it in your body. It will messes up a lot of systems. Reproduction. Many scientists believe that the true meaning of life is to be able to have offspring, the continuation of life. For example, at the cellular level, cell divides, you're making more cells. At the organismal level, the sperm and eggs during the sexual intercourse perhaps coming together and form that one cell, which later on becomes the embryos and the new person becomes growth, part of the necessities of life to be able to grow and, uh, be able to correctly function appropriately. Look at the child. A lot of senses is not developed yet. As they grow, then they could learn more, they could smell more, they could see more, they could hear more, all that stuff. All right. So, what do we need in terms of the survival needs? Obviously, we need energy, we need nutrients. Okay. That's the basics. We need oxygen as well. Without the oxygen, our cells kind of like cannot function. Okay. Water. Water is uh, general ingredients for many types of reaction to take place. Okay. Note that a lot of scientists look for water in other planet first. Okay. Water has a lot of different properties. We will take a look at some of those properties on the next uh, lecture. But yeah, uh, maintaining normal body temperature, that was part of the homeostasis. Uh, in fact, you need to achieve homeostasis at all level. Okay, atmospheric pressure, obviously the gas exchange, it requires certain atmospheric pressure to take place. You can't do this in other planets, for example, because you don't have a correct atmospheric pressure or concentration of those gases. So, kind of like reviewing the homeostasis, the states of balance. We'll talk about this more in the laboratory as well, but you wanted to maintain everything. It's a dynamic states of equilibrium, maintaining everything. Even though the outside environment might be changed, you want internal condition to be similar. That include the pH, that includes the amount of food that you eat, that includes the amount of sodium, amount of potassium, amount of calcium, amount of sugar or glucose, amount of everything, your blood pressure, all those systems have probably some kind of a homeostasis to operate. Okay, and they want to do something. We just talked about the PTH, parathyroid hormone, for example, or calcitonin, for example, to optimize the amount of calcium in our blood. Right? There's a lot of other things that they need to be optimized in blood. Temperature. Right? We can't function at the high temperature. You all felt how it was when you had fever. Not good. Can't function. You got to rest until your temperature goes down. Now you be able to eat. Otherwise, you vomit. You will not be able to rest, etc. Okay. So there are three components of control mechanism to the homeostasis. One is a receptor, is basically detecting things. Control center, what is it supposed to have? Like, what is your blood pressure supposed to be? 120 over 80. What is your heart rate supposed to be? What is the glucose level supposed to be in your blood. But these are control center. You wanted to control them. And then the effector. What are you doing in order to optimize it? If it goes up, what are you doing in order to lower it down? That's called effector. Okay. So, for example, those hormones that we just mentioned, you're doing that. You're releasing that to bring it back down or to take something up, right? So those are the effector. All right. So um, here is the idea. We need balance. We need homeostasis. If it gets imbalanced, the receptor detect that, send a signal to control center, and the control center, as the name of it implies, controls the effector, send a signal to muscles, and glands are usually the effector. Okay, and we'll talk about this a little bit more detail during your lab, but think about your air condition or your heating unit in your household. Right now it's kind of chilly, so we give an example of heating unit. You set the thermostat, that would be a control center at, let's say, 70 degrees. All right. So anytime it's getting cool, boom, the heating unit comes on. That's your effector. Well, how does it get detected? That's kind of like your receptors. So there is like a thermostat that can, detect the temperature changes. All right. Or thermometer. There is some way that they could detect that, right? When there is a detection that is your house or your room is getting cold, boom, it signaled the heating unit to produce heat. And the body does same thing. All right. So if you're exercising, you are getting hot, your body sense that, your brain can sense that. There's thermoreceptors everywhere in our body. All right, send a signal, hey, you're getting hot. Okay. And then your glands start working. In this case, the sweat glands start producing sweat. As the sweat evaporates, the body gets cooled off. All right, so that would be the negative feedback system. I gave you already example of the glucose, blood glucose level. All right, how if it goes up, you need to bring it back down, and that's where the insulin came alive, basically. So this is the idea. If the insulin if the glucose level is high, there is an insulin release, so you're bringing it back down. If the glucose level is down, then is a glucagon is the hormone that is being produced to bring the glucose back up. And again, this picture kind of like depicting a negative feedback system of how the regulation of the insulin works. And basically, the insulin is released by the pancreas, so pancreas can detect the amount of glucose in our blood. All right, it's supposed to be this much. All right, so whenever it's lower, it's going to kick in, and then it releasing um, the insulin to lower it. All right, and if it's low, then it's going to increase the glucagon in order to stimulate the glycogen that is in our liver and release that to make things balance. Okay, so again, these are kind of like the ideas for you. Okay, now if you have too much glucose, insulin, as it be released by the pancreas, can take this extra glucose and deposit it into the liver. So a liver is kind of like your bank. When you have extra money, you deposit it into your bank account. In here, when you have extra glucose, you could deposit it into the liver in form of what's known as a glycogen. Glycogen means many sugar. Okay. And here is another example of the positive feedback, you guys. So um, let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right. So positive feedback, as I mentioned, instead of counteracting the change, like for example, if it's high, bring it low, or if it's low, bring it back up. This will promote the change. Okay. So in this case, um, there is a blood vessels that have been ruptured and the blood is coming out. Okay. So now we know that we have these fragmented cell known as platelets that was part of our blood. We had white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets, if you recall the anatomy. So these platelets, they can come in and aggregate. Platelets is for blood clotting. Of course, there are some other protein molecules that can stick them together and so on. But the change happened to be higher amount of platelets. So platelets amount is going higher. But if you lower it now because of the negative feedback, you may not have enough of these aggregating to cause the plug in these blood vessels. So, as a result, what will happen is that you never be able to plug it in and you will be bleeding all the time. Okay? So, that small tear in the blood vessel wall is broken, and now we need to fix that. So, instead of lowering the amount when the platelets is increasing, positive feedback happens, meaning there's more and more platelets come in, all right, and more and more and more. So that is basically it was high to begin with, and now it's even higher. Once you plugged it in, then the negative feedback system kick in because you don't need extra platelets. Otherwise, the whole thing is going to get clogged up, right? So that's what happens. And you don't want way too many. So at one point in time, the negative feedback kicks in. Otherwise, the whole thing is going to get plugged, etc. But we don't want that. We want just enough, and then negative feedback kicking, and then basically you stop releasing the extra platelets, and basically in this case, the blood clotting happened to be regulated, meaning like maintained. Okay. All right. So there is a lot of homeostatic imbalance that causes diseases. Anytime you're going away from anything that was supposed to be a set balance there, you're looking for trouble. Okay. So the negative feedback system is a lot more common. Positive feedback is a very rare event. Most of the time, you need to reduce things when it's high and you need to bring things up when it's low. And that would be a negative feedback system. All right. So we are done with this particular lecture, and you could review the rest. There are some parts that is kind of like related to anatomy, and you already read anatomy stuff. I'm not going to ask you, but the chapter and the book itself is anatomy and physiology. We're looking at the physiology related parts right now. Okay, all right, great. I'll probably see you guys soon in the lab when the time comes for your lab, and we can talk about this, and I could bring it to your attention, and we will do a lab related to the homeostasis as well. Okay? All right. Hope you enjoyed the first lecture. Take care. See you guys later at your lab. Okay? Check your schedule. Make sure you know when and where your lab is. And currently, and sometimes there might be construction in the school, so you want to give yourself extra time to get there so that you won't be behind, and you might have trouble finding the place, not knowing the buildings, etc., and it could get confusing. All right, so give yourself plenty of time, get there safe, and it's better to be a little bit early than late. Okay. All right, I'll see you guys in the class and talk to you guys later. Bye bye.